Hello, Inedigabitti, this is Nocturne Gallery. You can learn something new about art in this video, or if you just want to enjoy the paintings and music, switch the audio track to Esperanto. There you'll hear only the music and see the artworks. Relax and enjoy art your way.
Welcome to the Nocturne Gallery. Okay, I want you to picture something. Imagine a painter. He died way back in 1516, right? 5 centuries ago. His world. It's all medieval theology, powerful patrons, this deep fear of hellfire. Now think about his paintings. Just bizarre, chaotic visions. You've got these half-human creatures, buildings exploding, musical instruments turned into, like, torture devices, grotesque stuff. So here's the really fascinating question we're tackling. How on earth did Hieronymus Bosch, this master painter, totally steeped in the religious world of the Netherlands back then, somehow create the perfect, almost chilling visual language for the traumas and, well, the psychological anxieties of the 20th century? It's quite a leap. Our exploration today is really about tracing this unexpected second life of Bosch. We want to figure out how his fame, which had sort of faded, suddenly came roaring back. And why did his medieval nightmares hit such a nerve in the modern world, particularly in 20th century art and psychology? What does that tell us about how we see things now? Let's start by getting a handle on the man himself. He wasn't some fringe figure, was he?
No, absolutely not. That's key. You have to understand, Bosch wasn't some isolated hermit having weird visions. He was a pillar of his community in Hertogenbosch, a respected master craftsman. He married well into money, and he was a prominent member of the Brotherhood of Our Lady, a very prestigious religious confraternity.
So establishment through and through.
Completely. And his clients weren't minor nobles either. We're talking about people like Philip the Handsome, who later became King of Castile, Margaret of Austria, powerful figures. So when you look at his art, you're not seeing rebellion against the system. You're seeing a highly successful, probably quite devout man translating the religious and moral ideas of his time onto wood panels.
And these paintings were meant to be understood, right? Like visual lessons, almost sermons?
Exactly. They weren't meant to be obscure, not initially anyway. His imagination, however wild, was grounded in the beliefs and, frankly, the fears of his era. Take his painting, The Seven Deadly Sins, the tabletop one. It literally functioned as a moral mirror for whoever owned it. You'd sit around it, contemplate the scenes, and right there in the middle, the inscription, fear for the Lord sees everything. It's a direct warning, constant vigilance.
A visual reminder of accountability. But he scaled that up too, didn't he? Apply that same moral judgment to the whole world in the Haywain.
Oh, definitely. The Haywain Triptych is where the satire gets really sharp. It's this grand allegory about how the world is just driven by vanity, vanitas. The main scene is this huge cart piled high with hay. Hay symbolizing, well, earthly riches, worldly goods, ultimately nothingness. And everyone, from the peasants scrambling below to the Pope and the Emperor riding alongside, they're all desperately trying to grab a piece of this hay, this nothingness.
And while they're busy doing that,
while they're completely caught up in this pointless chase, demons are literally dragging the whole cart and all of humanity with it straight towards hell on the right panel. It's a scathing critique of society, top to bottom.
Okay, so the message is clear. Avoid sin. Fear God's judgment. But the way he delivers it, the visuals are just so strange. We tend to think he just dreamed up all those monsters. The walking fish, the guy with a tree growing out of him, the bird-headed creature eating people. Where did that imagery actually come from?
Well, that assumption that it all sprang purely from his head is probably the biggest misconception about Bosch. He was brilliant, yes, but he was more of an adapter, an amplifier of existing ideas. His figures drew heavily on visual traditions that people at the time would have recognized.
Like what, for instance?
Think about the churches around him. Gothic cathedrals like St. John's, right there in his hometown, were covered in monstrous carvings. Gargoyles, chimeras, little devils tucked into corners.
Okay.
He basically took those stone warnings and brought them to life, gave them agency within his painted worlds.
So he didn't invent the monster, he just made it move and act in these terrifying new ways.
Precisely, and he combined that with literary sources too. He was definitely aware of popular books like Sebastian Brant's The Ship of Fools.
All right, the satire.
Yeah, a huge bestseller that poked fun at everyone's foolishness. Bosch taps into that same satirical spirit. And crucially, there were these visionary texts describing hell in lurid detail. Things like the vision of Tundale.
deal.
It was a famous 12th century account of a journey through the afterlife, describing the punishments in hell with almost journalistic precision. Bosch was educated. He knew about alchemy, astrology, engineering even. He used all this knowledge to make these spiritual warnings feel incredibly real and disturbing.
So this hugely successful, respected artist dies in 1516, and his work is famous for a while, but then things go quiet. His reputation kind of sinks. Why did that happen? What changed?
It was a major cultural shift. By the 17th and especially the 18th century, you're moving into the Enlightenment. The age of reason, rationality, classical order.
So suddenly all that complex medieval symbolism just didn't compute.
Exactly. Taste changed dramatically. People started valuing clarity, logic, harmony, thinking Greek and Roman ideals. Bosch's world, filled with religious mysteries, weird symbols, visual puns. It just seemed messy, confusing, maybe even primitive to Enlightenment sensibilities.
Difficult to decode.
Very. His work got labeled as just strained or fanciful, maybe even the product of a disturbed mind. And so for the most part, it was ignored, put away in collections. It was a long silence, really, almost 300 years.
Until the 20th century, and then bam, he's back.
Yeah.
And not just back, he's suddenly incredibly relevant, prophet-like even. The timing seems absolutely critical here. We're talking post-World War I, post-World War II.
Right after periods of unimaginable destruction, the fall of huge empires, industrialized warfare, societal upheaval on a massive scale.
The old world order just crumbled.
It completely collapsed. And in the middle of that wreckage, that collective trauma, people suddenly looked at Bosch's paintings, those apocalyptic landscapes, the chaos, the suffering, and they saw their own time reflected back at them.
It wasn't just about a theological hell anymore.
No. It felt like a mirror to the hell they were living through or had just survived. His work captured this deep anxiety, this fear of disintegration, of human cruelty let loose. It resonated profoundly.
And specific images took on new meaning, right? Like that ship of fools idea.
Yes, exactly. That image suddenly felt incredibly poignant. Not just a funny satire, but a metaphor for a whole civilization adrift, full of people pursuing vanity while the world sinks around them. You can almost see parallels with things like the Titanic disaster earlier in the century, this feeling of inevitable doom despite outward appearances.
It's the sense of breakdown that the artist really grabbed onto.
Oh, absolutely. At the 20th century art movements, especially Surrealism, saw him as a kindred spirit. André Breton, the founder of Surrealism, basically claimed Bosch as an ancestor.
A proto-surrealist. How did they make that connection? His world was so deeply religious.
Well, the Surrealists were all about exploring the subconscious, dreams, the irrational. They looked at Bosch's technique, this incredibly precise, realistic painting of totally impossible, nightmarish things, and saw a model for how to depict the inner world.
Rendering the irrational with utter clarity.
Exactly. Salvador Dalí especially was fascinated. He wasn't just interested in the chaos. He loved the weird, specific details in Bosch. You know, the knife fused with ears, those delicate glass bubbles holding tiny figures in the garden of earthly delights.
What did Dalí see in those?
He saw them almost as symbols of repressed desires, often sexual or violent impulses breaking through in bizarre forms. Modern anxieties made visible.
And Dalí even developed a method inspired by this, didn't he?
Right, his famous paranoia critical method. It was essentially a way of training himself to see multiple images, hidden meanings in ordinary things, like finding hidden faces in rocks or clouds, but taking it much further, systematically cultivating a kind of interpretive delusion.
And a way to tap into that layered meaning.
Precisely. That constant sense that things aren't what they seem, that there's a hidden, often disturbing reality just beneath the surface. That's the link Dalí felt with Bosch's own complex symbolic world.
And then alongside the artist, you have the rise of psychology. Psychoanalysis. Suddenly Bosch isn't just about theology anymore.
That's the other crucial element in his 20th century comeback. Psychology offered a completely new lens. What the church in 1500 saw as external forces, devils, temptations, the punishment for sin, modern psychology, started interpreting differently.
As internal struggles.
Exactly. Those terrifying creatures, those chaotic landscapes, they were seen as manifestations of the unconscious mind. The id, repressed desires, primal fears breaking loose. The battle wasn't against demons outside, it was inside the human psyche.
Which must have totally changed how people looked at his most famous work, The Garden of Earthly Delights. What was the big reinterpretation there?
Well, the most explosive one, though it's still debated by scholars, came from an art historian named Wilhelm Frenger. He put forward this really provocative theory that the garden wasn't a warning against sin at all. He argued it was actually painted for a secret religious sect, the Adamites.
The Adamites, who were they?
They were rumored to be a group trying to recapture a state of innocence, like before the fall of man in Eden. And supposedly they practiced a kind of liberated sexuality as part of their spiritual path.
Wow. So Fringer thought the garden was celebrating this, not condemning it. A vision of liberated innocence.
That was his argument. Now, there's no solid proof Bosch was linked to any such group, but the idea was incredibly potent in the 20th century. It flipped the painting's meaning on its head.
Turning a warning into almost a manifesto for free expression.
Pretty much. It resonated perfectly with mid-20th century ideas about sexual liberation, breaking taboos, seeing free love as potentially positive, even therapeutic. Think about someone like Norman O. Brown, the psychoanalytic thinker. In his book Love's Body from 1966, he actually uses the Garden of Earthly Delights as a key illustration for his theories about overcoming repression.
So Bosch's vision of damnation becomes a picture of potential psychological healing.
It's an amazing reversal, isn't it? Taking this medieval vision and repurposing it entirely for modern concerns.
And this influence spreads beyond just art history and psychology, right? His imagery becomes almost a cultural shorthand.
It really does. Those infernal machines, the lonely figures and bizarre landscapes, the overall sense of chaos, they become these powerful, easily understood metaphors for modern angst, for the struggle of the individual in a crazy world. You see it pop up in film, too. There's a Hungarian film, The Fifth Seal, from the 70s. It opens with scenes directly referencing Bosch's imagery, almost like setting a visual tone for the whole film's exploration of cruelty and moral compromise in dark times. The images work even detached from their original context.
So looking back at this whole journey, centuries long, what's the ultimate takeaway about Bosch's legacy? He's this figure right on the edge of the medieval and Renaissance periods.
He really is a bridge figure. He had the technical mastery that was emerging with the Renaissance, that incredible detail and skill, but he applied it to these profoundly spiritual, often quite medieval themes and warnings.
Making the invisible visible.
Perfectly put. He found a way to paint sin, temptation, dreams, maybe even the subconscious, and make it look terrifyingly real. He depicted a world where order and chaos are just constantly at war, which feels, well, very relevant to modern life, doesn't it?
He really did become this unwilling prophet for our own anxieties. Which leads to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to consider when you look at his work. Bosch painted hell, presumably, as a real place, an external punishment waiting for sinners. But maybe for us now, looking back 500 years later, the real horror in his paintings isn't about literal demons or eternal fire anymore. Maybe the terror is more internal. Recognizing the potential for that same chaos, that self-destruction, that breakdown of reason, not in some faraway hell, but right here, inside the human condition itself.